Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she finished changing the bandages on Private Johnson's injured leg. The young soldier had twisted his ankle during morning drills, and, while it wasn't serious, he was making enough noise to wake half the medical bay. "There you go, Johnson. Keep it elevated for the rest of the day, and you'll be back to training tomorrow," Sarah said with a gentle smile. "Thanks, Nurse Martinez. You're the best," Johnson replied, hobbling toward the exit. Sarah shook her head and began cleaning up the medical supplies. At 28 years old, she had been working as a nurse at Fort Braxton for 3 years now. It was a large military base in North Carolina, home to thousands of soldiers and support staff. The medical facility where she worked was always busy, treating everything from minor cuts and bruises to more serious injuries that came with military training. What bothered Sarah wasn't the work itself. She loved helping people and had always dreamed of being a nurse. What bothered her were the constant whispers and jokes from some of the soldiers and even a few of her fellow medical staff members. "There goes Martinez again, babying another soldier," she heard Corporal Davies whisper to his buddy as they walked past the medical bay window. "Yeah, I heard she's never even seen real combat. Just patches up scraped knees and runny noses," his friend replied with a laugh. Sarah pretended not to hear, but the words stung. It was true that she had never been deployed to a combat zone. Most of her experience was here on the base, treating routine injuries and illnesses. But that didn't make her work less important, did it? Dr. Reynolds, the head of the medical facility, noticed Sarah's expression as he walked into the treatment room. He was a kind man in his 50s who had served as an army medic before becoming a doctor. "Don't let them get to you, Sarah," he said quietly. "Their jokes say more about them than about you." "I know, Dr. Reynolds. It's just frustrating sometimes. I trained for 4 years to become a nurse. I've saved lives here on this base. But because I haven't been to Afghanistan or Iraq, some people think I'm just playing dress up." Dr. Reynolds nodded thoughtfully. "You know, I've been thinking about something. There's an opportunity coming up that might interest you. The Army is looking for experienced nurses to join a special medical response team. It would mean additional training and the possibility of being called for emergency situations." Sarah's eyes lit up. What kind of emergency situations? Could be anything. Natural disasters, combat zone evacuations, special operations support. It's demanding work, and the training is intense. But if you're accepted, you'd be one of the first responders when things go really wrong. "I'm interested," Sarah said without hesitation. Dr. Reynolds smiled. "I thought you might be. I'll put in a recommendation for you. The selection process starts next month." As Sarah continued her shift that day, she felt a new sense of purpose. Maybe this was her chance to prove that she was more than just a base nurse who treated minor injuries. The medical bay got busy again around lunchtime. A group of soldiers had been involved in a training accident with a military vehicle. Nothing too serious, but several men needed treatment for cuts, bruises, and one possible concussion. Sarah worked quickly and efficiently, cleaning wounds, applying bandages, and monitoring vital signs. She moved from patient to patient with calm confidence, making sure each soldier received proper care. "Nurse Martinez really knows what she's doing," she heard one of the injured soldiers say to his buddy. "Yeah, she's been taking good care of us," the other replied. These comments made Sarah feel better, but she knew that for every soldier who appreciated her work, there were others who still saw her as just another base nurse. After her shift ended, Sarah decided to visit the base library to research the special medical response team Dr. Reynolds had mentioned. She wanted to learn everything she could about what would be expected of her. The library was quiet, with just a few soldiers studying at scattered tables. Sarah found a computer and began searching for information about military medical emergency response teams. What she discovered both excited and intimidated her. These teams were called in for the most serious situations imaginable. They worked with special forces units, responded to mass casualty events, and operated in dangerous environments where regular medical personnel couldn't function. The training requirements were extensive. Physical fitness tests, advanced medical procedures, survival skills, and psychological evaluations. Only the best and most dedicated medical personnel were accepted. As Sarah read through the requirements, she felt a mix of nervousness and determination. This was exactly the kind of challenge she had been looking for. researching your next career move? A voice said behind her. Sarah turned to see Captain Williams, one of the base's helicopter pilots. He was a friendly man in his 30s who had always been respectful to the medical staff. Something like that, Sarah replied. Dr. Reynolds mentioned an opportunity with a special medical response team. Captain Williams nodded. Those teams do incredible work. I've flown a few of their missions. They go into places where most people wouldn't dare to step foot. Have you worked with any of the medical personnel from those teams? A few times. They're impressive, calm under pressure, highly skilled, and completely focused on their mission. If you're thinking about applying, I think you'd do well. Sarah felt encouraged by his words. At least some people on the base recognized her abilities. That evening, Sarah went for a run around the base perimeter. Physical fitness would be crucial if she wanted to join the special response team. As she ran, she thought about all the challenges that lay ahead. The next few weeks passed quickly. Sarah threw herself into preparing for the selection process. She increased her workout routine, studied advanced medical procedures, and even took some additional courses online. Dr. Reynolds submitted her application and recommendation. Now all she could do was wait. During this time, the whispers and jokes from some of the base personnel continued. Sarah overheard Sergeant Brooks talking to a group of soldiers near the mess hall. I heard Martinez is trying to join some elite medical team, he said with a smirk. Can you imagine? She'll probably faint the first time she sees real blood. The soldiers laughed, and Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger. She wanted to march over there and tell them exactly what she thought, but she knew that would only make things worse. Instead, she channeled her frustration into motivation. Every time someone made a joke or questioned her abilities, she pushed herself harder in her training. 3 weeks after submitting her application, Sarah received a letter in her mailbox. Her hands shook slightly as she opened it. Dear Nurse Martinez, it began. You have been selected for the preliminary screening process for the Special Medical Response Team. Please report to Building C-12 on Monday, April 15th at 0600 hours for your first evaluation. Sarah let out a small cheer of excitement. She had made it past the first hurdle. The preliminary screening was more intense than anything Sarah had ever experienced. It began with a comprehensive physical fitness test that pushed her to her limits. Pull-ups, push-ups, a 3-mile run, and obstacle course challenges that tested not just strength, but coordination and problem-solving skills. Next came written examinations covering advanced medical procedures, emergency protocols, and even basic military tactics. Sarah was grateful for all the studying she had done. The psychological evaluation was perhaps the most challenging part. A military psychologist asked probing questions about her motivations, her ability to handle stress, and her reactions to hypothetical emergency situations. Why do you want to join this team, Nurse Martinez? The psychologist asked. Because I want to make a real difference, Sarah replied honestly. I want to be there when people need help the most, even if it means putting myself at risk. You understand that this work can be dangerous? You could be deployed to combat zones, natural disaster areas, or other high-risk environments. Yes, I understand. I'm prepared for that. At the end of the long day, Sarah was exhausted but hopeful. She had given her best effort, and now she had to wait for the results. 2 weeks later, another letter arrived. Sarah's heart pounded as she opened it. Congratulations, Nurse Martinez. You have been accepted into the Special Medical Response Team Training Program. Training begins on May 1st and will last for 8 weeks. Be prepared for intensive physical and medical training that will test your limits. Sarah couldn't contain her excitement. She had done it. She was going to be part of something bigger than herself. When she shared the news with Dr. Reynolds, he beamed with pride. I knew you had it in you, Sarah. This is going to be an incredible opportunity. Not everyone shared his enthusiasm. When word spread around the base that Sarah had been accepted into the special response team, the reactions were mixed. Some people, like Captain Williams and several of her patients, congratulated her and expressed their confidence in her abilities. But others were skeptical or openly dismissive. I give her 2 weeks before she washes out, she heard Sergeant Brooks tell someone. She'll be back here treating scraped knees before the month is over, another soldier added. These comments hurt, but they also strengthened Sarah's resolve. She was going to prove every doubter wrong. The training program was located at a specialized facility 2 hours away from Fort Braxton. Sarah would live on-site during the 8-week program, returning to her regular duties only after successful completion. As her departure date approached, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had worked hard to get this opportunity, but she knew the real challenge was just beginning. The night before she left for training, Sarah sat in her small apartment on the base, packing her gear. She thought about the journey that had brought her to this point. The years of nursing school, the decision to join the military medical corps, the countless hours treating patients at Fort Braxton, and now this chance to prove herself at the highest level. She picked up a photo of her family from her dresser. Her parents had been skeptical when she decided to join the military, but they had come to support her choice. Her younger brother was serving as a Marine in the Pacific, and her sister was finishing her residency as a doctor in Chicago. "I'm going to make you all proud," she whispered to the photo. Early the next morning, Sarah loaded her gear into her car and drove away from Fort Braxton. In her rearview mirror, she could see the base growing smaller, but she wasn't looking back. She was focused entirely on what lay ahead. The training facility was an impressive complex of buildings surrounded by various outdoor training areas. As Sarah pulled into the parking lot, she saw other vehicles arriving. Her fellow trainees were arriving for what would be the most challenging 8 weeks of their lives. Sarah grabbed her bags and walked toward the main building. This was it. This was her chance to become the kind of medical professional she had always dreamed of being. The first person she met was Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, a tough-looking woman in her 40s who would be one of their primary instructors. "Welcome to hell, people," Rodriguez announced to the group of 12 medical personnel who had gathered in the main briefing room. "For the next 8 weeks, we're going to push you harder than you've ever been pushed. Some of you will quit. Some of you will fail. But those who make it through will become part of an elite team that saves lives in the most dangerous situations imaginable." Sarah looked around at her fellow trainees. There were nurses, paramedics, and even a few doctors. All of them looked nervous but determined. "Your first test begins now," Rodriguez continued. "You have 30 minutes to get settled in your quarters. Then, we meet at the obstacle course. Move out." Sarah hurried to her assigned room, a small but clean space with basic military furnishings. She quickly changed into her training uniform and checked her gear. In a few minutes, she would begin the most important challenge of her career. As she walked toward the obstacle course, Sarah thought about all the people back at Fort Braxton who doubted her abilities. She was going to prove them wrong, no matter what it took. The obstacle course was brutal. It consisted of rope climbs, wall scaling, crawling under barbed wire, and navigating through muddy water obstacles. The instructors shouted encouragement and criticism as the trainees struggled through each challenge. Sarah's muscles burned and her lungs screamed for air, but she pushed through each obstacle with determination. She wasn't the fastest or the strongest, but she refused to quit. "Come on, Martinez," Rodriguez shouted. "Your team is counting on you. Move, move, move." By the time Sarah crossed the finish line, she was covered in mud and exhausted, but she had completed every obstacle. More importantly, she was still standing while 2 of her fellow trainees had been helped off the course by instructors. "Not bad for a base nurse," Rodriguez said as Sarah caught her breath. "But this was just the warm-up. Tomorrow, we start the real training." That night, Sarah fell into her bunk completely exhausted. Her body ached from the day's challenges, but her spirit was strong. She had survived day 1, and she was ready for whatever came next. As she drifted off to sleep, Sarah thought about the long road ahead. 8 weeks of intensive training, followed by deployment to who knew where. It would be the adventure of a lifetime, and she was ready for it. The whispers and doubts from Fort Braxton seemed very far away now. Here, she was just another trainee trying to earn her place on an elite team. Her previous experience didn't matter. What mattered was what she did in the coming weeks. Sarah smiled as she closed her eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she was confident in her ability to meet them. She had come too far to quit now, and she was determined to prove that she belonged with the best medical personnel the military had to offer. The alarm clock screamed at 4:30 in the morning, but Sarah was already awake. 3 weeks into the Special Response Team training, her body had adjusted to the brutal schedule. She rolled out of bed, laced up her boots, and headed to the mess hall for a quick breakfast before the day's challenges began. The training had been relentless. Every day brought new tests of physical endurance, medical skill, and mental toughness. Sarah had learned to treat gunshot wounds under simulated enemy fire, perform emergency surgery in a tent during a thunderstorm, and rappel from helicopters while carrying full medical gear. For trainees had already washed out of the program. One couldn't handle the physical demands, another cracked under the psychological pressure, and 2 more were dismissed for failing medical competency tests. That left 8 determined individuals still fighting for their place on the team. Sarah had surprised herself with her resilience. The girl who had been mocked as a soft-based nurse was now completing challenges that would have been impossible for her just a few months earlier. She could carry a wounded soldier twice her weight over rough terrain, establish a field hospital in minutes, and remain calm while explosions simulated combat conditions around her. "Martinez, you're with Alpha Team today," Sergeant Rodriguez announced during the morning briefing. "We're doing a hostage rescue simulation. Medical support for a special forces operation." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. The hostage rescue scenarios were among the most challenging exercises in the program. They required split-second decision-making, perfect coordination with military units, and the ability to provide medical care under intense pressure. The training facility had a mock village set up for these exercises, complete with buildings, vehicles, and hidden areas where instructors with paintball weapons would play the role of hostile forces. The medical team's job was to support the special forces units and treat any casualties that occurred during the mission. Sarah checked her medical kit one final time. Bandages, morphine for fluids, surgical instruments, and emergency medications were all secured in easy-to-reach pouches. Her protective gear included body armor, helmet, and communication equipment that would keep her connected to the mission commander. The Special Forces team for this exercise was made up of instructors from various elite units. These men had real combat experience, and they didn't go easy on the trainees just because it was a simulation. Master Sergeant Collins, a weathered veteran with multiple deployments, briefed the combined team on the mission parameters. Intelligence indicates 3 hostages are being held in the central building of the village. Unknown number of hostile forces, possibly 6 to 8 individuals. Our job is to get in, neutralize the threats, secure the hostages, and get everyone out alive. Medical team stays with the command post until called forward. Sarah nodded along with her fellow medical trainees. The plan was straightforward, but she knew from experience that no plan survived contact with the enemy, even in a training exercise. The operation began at dawn. Sarah crouched behind a concrete barrier with the other medical personnel, listening to radio chatter as the Special Forces team moved through the village. Her heart pounded as she heard the first shots fired. "Contact, contact!" Taking fire from the second building. "Bravo team, move to flank left. Charlie team, covering fire." The paintball rounds cracked through the air, but Sarah knew that in a real mission, those would be actual bullets with deadly consequences. "Medic forward. Man down in building 2. Came the urgent call over the radio. Without hesitation, Sarah grabbed her medical kit and sprinted toward the designated building. 2 instructors provided covering fire as she ran through the simulated combat zone. Inside the building, she found Instructor Davis lying on the floor, clutching his leg. Red paint marked where he had been hit by enemy fire. "Possible femoral artery damage," Davis said, playing his role as a wounded soldier. "Lots of blood loss, going into shock." Sarah immediately went to work. In a real situation, a severed femoral artery could kill someone in minutes. She applied a tourniquet above the wound site, started in 4-line for fluid replacement, and administered morphine for pain management. "Casualty stabilized," she reported over the radio. "Ready for evacuation." "Negative on evac," came the reply from Master Sergeant Collins. "LZ is hot. You'll need to hold position until we clear the area." Sarah continued monitoring her patient while explosions and gunfire echoed around the building. She checked his vital signs, adjusted his flow rate, and prepared for the possibility that his condition might deteriorate. "Second casualty in the main building," another voice crackled over the radio. Sarah looked toward the central structure where the hostage rescue was taking place. One of her fellow trainees was already moving in that direction, but she could see that the situation was becoming complicated. Martinez, can you handle your patient alone? Master Sergeant Collins asked over the radio. Sarah assessed Instructor Davis's condition. He was stable for now, but moving him alone would be difficult. Affirmative. Patient is stable and can be moved with minimal support. Roger. Leave him with the command post and get to the main building. We've got multiple casualties. Sarah helped Davis to his feet and supported him as they moved back to the command post. Then, she grabbed a fresh medical kit and headed toward the sound of gunfire. The main building was a 3-story structure with multiple rooms and stairwells. Sarah could hear shouts and movement as the Special Forces team worked to clear each room and secure the hostages. She found the second casualty on the first floor. Instructor Martinez, no relation, despite the shared name, was simulating a chest wound from fragmentation. Possible pneumothorax, he gasped. Difficulty breathing, chest pain. A collapsed lung was a serious injury that required immediate intervention. Sarah quickly assessed his breathing and determined that he needed a needle decompression to relieve pressure in his chest cavity. Working quickly but carefully, she performed the procedure while gunfire continued above them. In a real combat situation, there would be no time for hesitation or second-guessing. Breathing improved, Instructor Martinez reported. Good work under pressure. Before Sarah could respond, another call came over the radio. Medic to the 3rd floor. Hostage down. Sarah handed off her patient to another trainee who had just arrived and grabbed her kit again. The 3rd floor was where the heaviest fighting had taken place, and she could smell the smoke from flashbang grenades as she climbed the stairs. In the final room, she found Master Sergeant Collins kneeling next to a woman who was playing the role of an injured hostage. The other hostages had been successfully rescued, but this one had been caught in the crossfire. Gunshot wound to the abdomen, Collins reported. She's been hit bad. Sarah immediately began her assessment. Abdominal gunshot wounds were among the most dangerous injuries she might encounter in the field. Internal bleeding, organ damage, and shock were all possibilities that had to be addressed quickly. She started in 4-line, applied pressure dressings to control bleeding, and administered pain medication. The patient's blood pressure was dropping, indicating possible internal hemorrhage. We need to get her to a hospital immediately, Sarah reported. She's not stable enough for extended transport. LZ is clear, Collins replied. Helicopter evac in 5 minutes. Sarah continued working to stabilize her patient while the Special Forces team secured the area. When the helicopter simulation arrived, she helped load the casualty and continued providing care during the mock transport to the hospital. After the exercise concluded, all participants gathered for an after-action review. This was where instructors critiqued performance and provided feedback for improvement. Overall, good execution, Master Sergeant Collins began. The medical response was professional and effective. Martinez, your work under fire was particularly impressive. You made sound decisions and provided quality care even when the situation was chaotic. Sarah felt a surge of pride at the recognition. Earning respect from experienced Special Forces personnel was not something that happened easily. Sergeant Rodriguez added her own assessment. Your medical skills are solid, and you're showing real improvement in tactical awareness. You're thinking like a combat medic now, not just a hospital nurse. Over the remaining weeks of training, Sarah continued to excel. She mastered helicopter insertion techniques, learned to operate advanced medical equipment in field conditions, and developed the mental toughness needed for high-stress operations. The final exercise was a comprehensive test that combined everything they had learned. A simulated plane crash in hostile territory, with multiple casualties, enemy forces in the area, and limited resources for treatment and evacuation. Sarah was designated as the senior medic for the exercise, responsible for triaging casualties and coordinating medical care. It was a huge responsibility that tested her leadership skills as well as her medical expertise. The crashed aircraft was actually a mock-up constructed in a remote area of the training facility. Smoke machines and pyrotechnics created a realistic crash scene, complete with scattered debris and simulated fires. Sarah and her team rappelled from a helicopter into the crash site while instructors with paintball weapons played the role of enemy soldiers attempting to prevent the rescue operation. Multiple casualties spread across the crash site, Sarah reported over the radio as she began her initial assessment. Establishing triage area behind the engine block for protection. The triage process required her to quickly evaluate each casualty and categorize them by severity. Red tags for immediate life-threatening injuries, yellow for urgent but stable, green for minor injuries, and black for those beyond help. She found 12 casualties scattered around the crash site. 3 were tagged red and required immediate intervention. 5 were yellow tags that needed treatment but could wait. 3 were green tags with minor injuries. And 1 was a black tag that simulated a fatality. While enemy fire continued around the crash site, Sarah coordinated her team to provide care to the most critical casualties first. For lines, pressure dressings, airway management, and pain medication were administered rapidly but carefully. "LZ is hot," came the radio call. "Helicopter can't land until the area is secured." "How long until the area is clear?" Sarah asked. "Unknown. Continue treatment and prepare for extended operations." This was exactly the kind of situation that separated good medics from exceptional ones. Sarah had to keep multiple critical patients alive with limited resources while under fire in a hostile environment. She directed her team members to specific tasks while maintaining overall situational awareness. One medic monitored vital signs on the most critical patient. Another prepared casualties for helicopter evacuation. A third organized medical supplies and equipment. "Patient 2 is going into shock," one of her team members reported. Blood pressure dropping fast. Sarah immediately moved to assess the situation. The patient was simulating massive blood loss from a leg wound. She applied a tourniquet, started a second 4-line, and administered fluids to combat shock. "Keep pressure on that wound," she instructed. "Monitor his breathing, and let me know if it changes." For 45 minutes, Sarah and her team kept all the critical casualties alive while the Special Forces unit worked to secure the area. It was the longest, most intense medical scenario she had ever experienced. When the all-clear finally came and the evacuation helicopters arrived, Sarah felt a tremendous sense of accomplishment. Every patient who could be saved had been saved, and the operation had been executed with professional precision. During the final critique, the lead instructor, Colonel Peterson, addressed the entire group of trainees. "Ladies and gentlemen, you have completed one of the most demanding medical training programs in the military. Those of you who are still here have proven that you have the skills, the dedication, and the mental toughness to serve on special operations medical teams." He looked directly at Sarah as he continued. "Some of you have exceeded all expectations. Martinez, your performance throughout this program has been outstanding. You've shown leadership, technical competence, and the ability to remain calm under extreme pressure." Sarah felt tears of pride welling up in her eyes. After 8 weeks of grueling training, she had not only survived but excelled. "You will now return to your home bases for a brief period before receiving your first operational assignments," Colonel Peterson announced. "Remember that your training never ends. Every mission will teach you something new, and every patient you treat will depend on the skills you've developed here." As Sarah packed her gear for the return trip to Fort Braxton, she reflected on how much she had changed over the past 2 months. The uncertain base nurse who had applied for the program was gone, replaced by a confident special operations medic ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The drive back to Fort Braxton gave her time to think about what would happen next. She would return to her regular duties temporarily, but she knew it wouldn't be long before she received orders for her first special operations deployment. When she arrived back at the base, word of her successful completion of the program had already spread. The reactions were mixed, just as she had expected. Dr. Reynolds greeted her with a huge smile and a congratulatory handshake. "I'm incredibly proud of you, Sarah. I always knew you had it in you." Captain Williams stopped by the medical facility to offer his congratulations as well. "I heard you impressed some very tough instructors. That's not easy to do." But not everyone was pleased with her success. Sergeant Brooks made sure she overheard his conversation with another soldier near the mess hall. "So Martinez thinks she's special now because she passed some fancy training program. We'll see how long that lasts when she gets into a real situation." Sarah didn't let the negative comments bother her. She knew that her actions would speak louder than words, and she was confident that she would prove herself when the opportunity arose. 2 weeks after returning to Fort Braxton, that opportunity came sooner than expected. The emergency alert came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Sarah was deep in sleep when her phone exploded with the shrill sound that meant immediate deployment. She was dressed and ready in less than 5 minutes, grabbing her pre-packed gear and rushing to the base helicopter pad. Dr. Reynolds was already there, along with Captain Williams, who would be piloting the mission. The urgency in their faces told Sarah this wasn't a training exercise. "What's the situation?" Sarah asked as she loaded her medical equipment onto the Apache helicopter. "Special Forces team in trouble about 60 miles north of here," Captain Williams explained rapidly. They were on a classified mission when their helicopter went down in rough terrain. Multiple casualties, hostile forces in the area, and weather conditions are deteriorating fast. Sarah felt her heart rate spike, but her training kicked in immediately. This was exactly the kind of situation she had prepared for during those grueling 8 weeks. "How many casualties?" she asked, checking her medical supplies one final time. "Unknown," Dr. Reynolds replied. Initial radio contact indicated at least 4 injured, possibly more. One is critical with chest trauma. As the Apache helicopter lifted off into the dark sky, Sarah reviewed her mental checklist. Trauma protocols, triage procedures, emergency medications, and surgical techniques all ran through her mind in rapid succession. The flight took 45 minutes through increasingly rough weather. Rain pelted the helicopter windows, and wind turbulence made the ride uncomfortable. Sarah could see Captain Williams fighting to maintain control as they approached the crash site. "LZ is going to be tight," Williams announced over the intercom. "Rocky terrain, limited flat space, and we're getting reports of enemy movement in the area." Through her night vision goggles, Sarah could see the wreckage of the downed helicopter in a small clearing surrounded by dense forest. Smoke was still rising from the twisted metal, and she could make out several figures moving around the crash site. "Medical team, prepare for immediate deployment," Williams said. "We're going in fast, and staying only long enough to load casualties. Hostile forces are approximately 1 mile out, and moving this direction." The Apache touched down hard on the uneven terrain. Sarah was out of the helicopter before the rotors stopped spinning, her medical kit in one hand and additional supplies in the other. Master Sergeant Thompson, the team leader of the downed Special Forces unit, met her at the edge of the clearing. Blood was streaming down his face from a head wound, but he was still coordinating the rescue efforts. "Glad to see you, Doc," he said, using the traditional term of respect for medical personnel. "We've got 4 wounded, 1 critical. Johnson took shrapnel to the chest, and he's in bad shape." Sarah immediately moved toward the casualty collection point where the injured soldiers had been gathered. Her training had taught her to assess the overall situation first, then focus on individual patients based on triage priorities. The first soldier she examined had a broken arm and multiple lacerations. Painful, but not life-threatening. She quickly applied pressure dressings to control bleeding and fashioned a splint for his arm. "You'll be fine," she told him. "We'll get you out of here soon." The second casualty had taken a bullet to his leg. The wound was bleeding heavily, but Sarah could see that no major arteries had been hit. She applied a tourniquet to control bleeding and started in 4-line for fluid replacement. The third soldier was unconscious with a severe head injury. Sarah checked his pupils with a small flashlight and assessed his breathing. He was stable for the moment, but would need immediate hospital care. Then, she reached the critical patient. Specialist Johnson was barely conscious, his breathing labored and irregular. Blood was soaking through makeshift bandages on his chest, and Sarah could see that he was going into shock. "Talk to me, Johnson," she said as she began her assessment. "Stay with me. Can't breathe," he gasped. "Hurts bad." Sarah quickly examined his chest wound. Shrapnel had punctured his lung, causing a tension pneumothorax that was preventing him from breathing properly. If she didn't act immediately, he would die within minutes. "I need to decompress his chest," she announced to Master Sergeant Thompson. "This is going to be rough, but it's the only way to save him." Working by the light of a small tactical flashlight, Sarah prepared to perform a needle thoracostomy. It was a procedure she had practiced dozens of times during training, but this was her first time doing it on a real patient under combat conditions. She located the correct insertion point between Johnson's ribs, sterilized the area as best she could under the circumstances, and inserted a large needle to release the pressure in his chest cavity. The effect was immediate. Johnson's breathing improved dramatically, and his color began to return to normal. "Outstanding work," Thompson said. "You just saved his life." But Sarah wasn't finished. Johnson still had significant blood loss and needed immediate evacuation to a hospital. She started 2 lines, administered morphine for pain, and applied fresh pressure dressings to his wounds. "How much time do we have?" she asked Thompson while continuing to work on Johnson. "Enemy forces are maybe 30 minutes out," he replied. "We need to be gone before they get here." Sarah looked at her 4 patients. The soldier with the broken arm could walk with assistance. The leg wound was stable and could tolerate transport. The head injury was unconscious but breathing on his own. And Johnson, while critical, was now stable enough to move. "All casualties ready for evacuation," she announced. Loading the wounded soldiers into the Apache helicopter was a challenge. Space was limited, and Johnson required constant monitoring during transport. Sarah had to work around other soldiers and equipment while maintaining 4 lines and monitoring vital signs. As the helicopter lifted off, Sarah continued providing medical care to all 4 patients simultaneously. Johnson's condition remained critical, requiring frequent blood pressure checks and adjustment of his flow rate. The head injury patient needed constant airway monitoring to ensure he continued breathing properly. "ETA to the hospital 25 minutes, Captain Williams announced over the intercom. Sarah knew that Johnson might not survive that long without additional intervention. His blood pressure was dropping despite the 4 fluids, indicating possible internal bleeding that she couldn't address in the helicopter. "I need you to contact the hospital," she radioed to Williams. "Tell them we have a critical chest trauma patient who will need immediate surgery. Have a trauma team standing by." "Roger that," Williams replied. For the next 25 minutes, Sarah fought to keep Johnson alive. She monitored his breathing, adjusted his medications, and provided constant reassurance that help was coming. "Stay with me, Johnson," she repeated over and over. "You're going to make it. Just hang in there." When the helicopter finally touched down at the hospital, a trauma team was waiting with gurneys and equipment. Sarah quickly briefed the emergency room doctor on each patient's condition and the treatment she had provided. "Excellent work under difficult conditions," the doctor told her as Johnson was rushed into surgery. "Your field treatment probably saved his life." 3 hours later, Sarah was sitting in the hospital waiting room when Dr. Reynolds found her. She was still in her combat gear, covered in blood, and exhausted from the adrenaline crash. "How are they doing?" she asked. "Johnson is out of surgery and stable," Dr. Reynolds reported. "The surgeon said your needle decompression and IV therapy kept him alive long enough to get proper treatment. The other 3 are all going to make full recoveries." Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had done her job, and everyone was going to be okay. The ride back to Fort Braxton was quiet. Sarah stared out the helicopter window as the sun came up over the North Carolina countryside. She thought about how different this morning was from the previous day, when her biggest concern had been treating routine injuries in the base medical facility. Word of the successful rescue mission spread quickly around Fort Braxton. By the time Sarah returned to the base, her actions had become the subject of intense discussion among the soldiers and staff. The reaction was dramatically different from what she had experienced before her special operations training. Soldiers who had previously dismissed her as just another base nurse now looked at her with genuine respect and admiration. Sergeant Brooks, who had been one of her harshest critics, approached her as she was walking to the mess hall for lunch. "Martinez," he said, extending his hand for a handshake. "I owe you an apology. I heard about what you did last night. That was some seriously impressive work." Sarah shook his hand, but she didn't feel any satisfaction in proving him wrong. She had never wanted to earn respect through drama or heroics. She had simply wanted to do her job and help people who needed medical care. "I was just doing what I was trained to do," she replied simply. "No, it was more than that," Brooks insisted. "You saved lives under fire. That takes guts and skill that most people don't have." Over the following days, Sarah found herself fielding questions from other medical personnel who wanted to know about the Special Operations Training Program. Several nurses and medics expressed interest in applying for the program themselves. Dr. Reynolds called her into his office for a formal debriefing about the mission. "Sarah, I want you to know how proud I am of your performance," he said. "Captain Williams and Master Sergeant Thompson both submitted reports praising your professionalism and medical skills under extremely difficult conditions." "Thank you, Dr. Reynolds. The training prepared me well for that kind of situation." "There's something else I need to tell you," he continued. "You're being recommended for a commendation medal for your actions during that rescue mission. It will become part of your permanent record." Sarah felt honored but also somewhat uncomfortable with the attention. She had joined the Special Operations Medical Program to improve her skills and serve where she was needed most, not to become famous or collect awards. 2 weeks later, Sarah received new orders that would take her to her first overseas deployment. A Special Forces unit in Afghanistan was requesting additional medical support for an upcoming operation, and she had been selected to join them. As she prepared for deployment, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed over the past few months. The base nurse who had been mocked and dismissed was now a respected member of an elite medical team, heading to one of the most dangerous places in the world. The night before her departure, several of her colleagues organized a farewell dinner at the base officers' club. Captain Williams, Dr. Reynolds, and even some of the soldiers who had previously questioned her abilities came to wish her well. To Sarah Martinez, Captain Williams said, raising his glass in a toast, "Who proved that courage and skill matter more than where you come from or what people think they know about you." Everyone in the room raised their glasses and repeated the toast. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the support and respect she now enjoyed from her peers. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came when Specialist Johnson, who had recovered from his injuries, made a surprise appearance at the dinner. "I wanted to thank you personally," he said to Sarah. "The doctors told me I would have died if you hadn't been there that night. You gave me a chance to see my family again." Sarah fought back tears as she hugged the young soldier. This was why she had become a nurse, and why she had pushed herself to join the Special Operations Medical Team. Moments like this made all the training, all the doubts, and all the criticism worthwhile. As her deployment date arrived, Sarah stood on the tarmac at Fort Braxton, loading her gear onto the transport aircraft that would take her to Afghanistan. She was no longer the uncertain base nurse who had applied for special training months earlier. She was now a confident, skilled medical professional ready to serve wherever she was needed. Dr. Reynolds came to see her off, along with Captain Williams and several other colleagues who had become friends and supporters. "Remember," Dr. Reynolds said as they shook hands goodbye, "you've already proven that you belong with the best. Now go show them what a Fort Braxton nurse can do." Sarah smiled and climbed aboard the aircraft. As it taxied toward the runway, she looked back at the base that had been her home for 3 years. It would always be special to her, not because it was where she had been comfortable, but because it was where she had found the courage to push beyond what others expected of her. The aircraft lifted off into the clear North Carolina sky, carrying Sarah toward her next adventure. She didn't know exactly what challenges awaited her in Afghanistan, but she was confident in her ability to meet them. Behind her, Fort Braxton grew smaller in the distance. But the lessons she had learned there, both about medicine and about herself, would stay with her forever. In the medical facility she was leaving behind, a new group of young nurses and medics were just beginning their careers. Some of them would face the same doubts and criticism that Sarah had experienced. But her example had shown them that with dedication, training, and courage, it was possible to overcome any obstacle and earn a place among the very best. As the transport aircraft climbed toward its cruising altitude, Sarah opened a book about advanced trauma surgery that she had brought for the long flight. There was always more to learn, always ways to improve her skills and better serve the soldiers who would depend on her medical expertise. She thought about the Apache helicopter crew that had specifically requested her for their mission, the wounded soldiers whose lives she had helped save, and the respect she had earned from colleagues who had once questioned her abilities. The girl who had been laughed at was now the medic that Special Forces teams asked for by name. It had been a long journey from that first day when she overheard soldiers making jokes about the base nurse who had never seen real combat. But Sarah had proven that real strength doesn't come from where you start. It comes from how far you're willing to go to become the person you're meant to be. And as her aircraft headed toward the challenges that awaited her in Afghanistan, she was ready for whatever came next.